Imagine going to sleep as a law-abiding citizen, only to wake up the very next morning as a federal criminal. You haven't hurt anyone, you haven't stolen a cent, but overnight, the gold sitting inside your home has been declared illegal. The penalty for keeping it? 10 years in a federal prison. This threat triggered a transfer of wealth that targeted the private savings of an entire nation. It was a seizure so massive that it didn't target a bank vault or an armored truck. In just 30 days, over 3,000 tons of gold vanished, and the victims voluntarily handed it over to the United States government. To understand how this was possible, we have to look at 1933. The Great Depression was paralyzing the country. Banks were collapsing daily, life savings were evaporating, and terrified citizens rushed to withdraw their money. But they didn't want paper. At the time, the US dollar was tied to the gold standard. Every dollar in circulation had to be backed by physical precious metal in the treasury. As panic spread, people demanded their physical gold. The Federal Reserve's vaults were draining rapidly, pushing the entire financial system to the brink of collapse. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt realized that to save the national economy, he would have to seize the gold from his own people. Roosevelt had been in the White House for just a single month when he determined that the situation required measures never before seen in American governance. On April 5, 1933, he signed Executive Order 6102, a mandate that criminalized the possession of gold for every person in the country. Citizens had exactly 25 days to surrender all gold coins and bullion to the Federal Reserve. The government set a mandatory price of $20.67 per ounce. There was no negotiation. If you refused, you faced a $10,000 fine, 6 times the average yearly salary, or up to 10 years behind bars. A wave of panic swept the nation. Within days, lines stretched for entire blocks outside of banks as citizens rushed to comply before the deadline. People carried in their most precious family heirlooms. They handed over rare coins minted during the California Gold Rush, trading their history for paper bills that were rapidly losing value. The initial collection was a success for the state. By the deadline, the government had seized over 3,600 tons of gold. The threat of state violence successfully overrode the public's instinct to protect their own wealth, setting the stage for a massive bait-and-switch. Not everyone went quietly. Across the country, a small number of citizens chose to hide their wealth. The government responded with an aggressive crackdown. The FBI launched active investigations into anyone suspected of hoarding gold, while banks were forced to report any suspicious transactions. The government opened thousands of criminal cases. Citizens faced fines that could bankrupt a household and prison sentences of up to 10 years. Among those resisting was Frederick Barber Campbell, a businessman who refused to surrender his stockpile of gold bars. Campbell hired a legal team and took the federal government to court. He argued that the confiscation violated the Constitution, stripping citizens of private property without just compensation. The case escalated through the legal system. Campbell's challenge eventually reached the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. He was the final line of defense. If Campbell won, the government's entire multi-billion-dollar operation would legally collapse. In 1935, the Supreme Court delivered their verdict. They ruled entirely in favor of the federal government. This ruling effectively legalized the massive seizure, ensuring the gold would remain in state hands. For Campbell, the fallout was absolute. He lost everything he had fought to protect. The immense stress of the battle took a physical toll. Campbell suffered a severe heart attack right on the courtroom floor. With the constitutional challenges annihilated and the resistance crushed, the government was unrestrained to execute the final, most profitable phase of their plan. Less than a year after the confiscation, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act. Overnight, the government officially raised the price of gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. By artificially inflating the value of the exact same gold they had just forced citizens to sell, the government generated an instant 70% profit. They pocketed $2.8 billion. At the time, that represented nearly half of the entire U.S. federal budget. The state didn't simply take the gold. It used legislative power to devalue the currency in every citizen's pocket, creating a secret tax without their consent. With thousands of tons of wealth now under federal control, the government built a fortress to protect the haul. They constructed the most highly guarded storage facility on Earth, Fort Knox. Today, the government claims over 8,000 tons of gold still sit safely behind those walls, but the American public hasn't been allowed to independently audit or verify the contents of Fort Knox since 1974. A half-century of secrecy has obscured the true fate of the gold. Does the institution that orchestrated this mass seizure still hold the gold, or has the ultimate treasure vanished once again?